this whole process started for the town back in 2014. You'll notice on the far left here where it says original statements of interest submitted. So the town submitted their first SOI, I'll call it for short, back in 2014. It took them 6 consecutive years of submissions. So if you submit and it's rejected, you got to do the same thing the next year. So 6 consecutive years, and then eventually in 2019, April of 2019, the town was accepted into the program. And then shortly thereafter, in December of 2019, the town was invited to participate in a feasibility study. And so from there, the project jumped into Module 2, which is forming the project team. That's where, back in December of 2021, Skanska was hired, and then we helped the town draft up a request for services for a design team, and that brought along these fine folks here from Jones Whitsitt Architects in association with Sims Maney and McKee, and you'll be hearing from them later. So once we had our team established, we then started the feasibility study, and there are 2 required submissions in the feasibility study. The first is the preliminary design program, which our team submitted in August of 2022. Once we got through that process, we then started the second submission, which is called the preferred schematic report. And so essentially what happens is that the PDP, and I'm sure the design team will get into this a little bit more later, but the PDP, the first leg of that process, you really analyze, all the possible options. It's the first, the Kickstarter, if you will, for the project. So we need to analyze all of the information, look at the educational program, and basically look into any avenue that we can to try to just get the best solution for the project. And so in this second submission, the preferred schematic report, with our PDP submission, we designated 3 options. 1 new construction, 1 addition renovation, and 1 was called a base upgrade or a code upgrade. With our preferred schematic report, the preferred solution was new construction. And so we submitted the PSR, God, it was just last month, so February 14th. We've since gotten feedback from the MSBA on that submission, and we're looking forward to a April 26th Board of Directors meeting for approval of the feasibility study in whole. And so, assuming that all goes well at that April 26th meeting, which I see no reason why it wouldn't, we'll then be entering schematic design, which is Module 4 up there. And schematic design is a very critical part of the whole project because essentially we're taking that one option, the preferred solution, and we're fully defining the budget and the scope of that option. And so at the end of that process is essentially when the state will they'll form an agreement with the town. It's called the Project Scope and Budget Agreement. And the town, once they sign that agreement, has 120 days in order to get a funding vote, an approved funding vote for the full appropriation of the project budget. So you'll see in Module 5 here, we have townwide vote. That is on November 7th of this year. We know that date. That's going to be at the regular town election. And so at this juncture, the project can go 2 ways. So if a vote fails, what will happen is the district, the town has 10 business days basically to come up to develop a plan and send that off to the MSBA. The plan needs to describe why the town thinks that the project vote failed, and they need to come up with a solution and a timeline for doing so and spell it all out. I will say that a failed vote would likely result in the town being required to submit a new statement of interest, because essentially what happens is when you kick that plan back to the state, they then need to determine if it's worthwhile to continue to set aside funding for this project. If they feel as though there is a good chance that it will go through, then perhaps they will keep you guys in the system. If not, like I said before, there are so many other projects in need, so they really can't wait around too long for that to take place. So should the vote pass, our team will move right into what is called detailed design, which is Module 6, which is essentially further build out of the construction documents, the whole plan for the project. And then once we get 100%, or once we get our documents ready, we then go into bidding and selection of a construction team. And then lastly, we will be jumping into construction from there in July of, right now we have it proposed in July 2024, and it's about a 2-year build we're projecting for the building aspect itself, and then there's some associated site work after that. But we are projecting right now a move-in date for staff and students in August of 2026. And so, yes, question right there?
Sorry, finish your talk.
That was about it.
I had a question about the funding. With this, assuming knock on wood there's a yes vote, but then of course once construction starts and money, the anticipated funding is less, what's the likelihood, if at all, of getting additional funding back from the state? Any chance of getting more money from the state?
No,
Or
you will
once
know.
you're approved, that's it?
Essentially, so when I was talking about, what we're working towards right now, the project scope and budget agreement, which will be in place this summer, that spells out all the specifics of the reimbursement from the state to the town. It won't change after that. That's kind of the gospel from there on out. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just
Okay.
didn't know if you get 2 bites at the end.
Yes, sir. So right now, the district has I think it's 56%, I'm forgetting, it's 56 point something.
Reimbursement rate of 56.8 right now. One thing to recognize is that the MSBA is already partnering with us. So to do this feasibility study, we had estimated to do all the work that's being done, hire owner project manager, hire a design team, start to produce documents, do all the studies that are needed, traffic study, maybe some of the other studies that were geotechnical study. The town had estimated that it might cost upwards of $1.2 million. Once we had appropriated that money, MSBA gave us a funding agreement where they will reimburse up to 56.8% of, here's the key words, eligible costs. And so there's a lot of ineligible costs, no matter whether it's a feasibility study or full construction. But the eligible costs, they're already reimbursing us and partnering with us at 56.8%. So as we go forward, that could shift, we don't know. We'll have a new funding agreement, and there will be a new percentage that will be determined. Does that make sense?
That's exactly it, Gordon, thank you.
Well, that's why I'm here.
All right, if there aren't any other questions right now, I'm going to kick it right back over to Gordon for the next slide.
Okay, so as we put together our full team that you're seeing up in front of you, we really hit the ground, had to... Okay, thank you. We really had to hit the ground running last May, but we wanted to make sure that we got staff input, that we got student input, we got family input. So the design team started working with our staff right in May and having interviews with staff members, not only what are the current challenges, but what do they see for the future? What would the needs be? Started to meet with students. We had 3 visiting sessions. We also had one public forum similar to this held in the auditorium. I believe that was in June. And what we've tried to do in each of our public presentations is solicit feedback, react to that feedback, or first digest and review that feedback as a school building committee and a design team, and then start to react and put together what makes sense for East Longmeadow High School in the future, but East Longmeadow as a town. And so some of the things that kept coming back to us was that this building is student-centered and needs to continue to be student-centered. We need to be a community building. We need to be collaborative. That's both within the building and our daily work, but also collaborative with all the town departments, because this building is used almost 24/7. And so in the future, we want to make sure that we're supporting everyone who uses this building. We obviously need technology going forward. That's why Mr. Quimby is right here. And that we have the support and we reflect the needs of the town. That's what came out of the visioning process, not only in the spring, but as we went forward. We held a public forum like this at the Council on Aging in September. We had a presentation here in this cafeteria in November. In between, we were meeting with school councils and PTOs, and now we're meeting with all of you tonight. When we have more information, newer information, we're going to have another one in May. I believe it's scheduled for May 18th. So we're going to continue to bring you the information and hopefully continue to solicit your feedback.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Great to see an awesome turnout this evening to learn about this project. So, as members of the design team, what have we been doing for the past many months? Essentially, we had to start with looking at what you have. You all know what you have. We needed to come and learn about East Longmeadow, your attributes, and where things need improvements. So this is your bird's eye view of the site, the existing conditions. You are nestled very close to the center of town, less than a mile away. You've got an incredibly beautiful site, over 61 acres. You're bounded on the north and west by residences, on the east by St. Michael's Church, and the south by industrial uses that are nicely buffered by woods. Next slide, please. So again, what our work has been is to take a look at the existing conditions of both the site and the building. And, you know, with respect to the site, a few notable things already stated. You've got space here, which is amazing. It's an incredibly spacious site to really develop a wonderful project on. Right now, you have more than adequate parking, and essentially your athletic fields are in pretty good condition. However, where there are areas that need improvement or rethinking, you know, we have some accessibility issues to the building, both from a standpoint of condition, slope, that really should be looked at and will be taken care of. There is not a great separation between bus and vehicular and pedestrian traffic on the site, so that's something that, you know, is a high concern from a safety standpoint. A lack of dedicated pedestrian routes, and also loading and service area really can't accommodate large vehicles. So my understanding is a lot of deliveries have to come through the front door. So some challenges here that our project will definitely remedy. Can you go to the next slide, please? So from a standpoint of building and the spaces in the building, you know, understanding that this is a school that's been built over 3 separate construction phases, starting back in 1959. So the gold color is you know, the original construction, and then there were 2 additions that occurred in 64 and 73, creating the building that you have now. So again, it's old. And then the diagram on the right indicates the spaces in red are essentially signaling spaces that are undersized. Now, that says based on 5% under the MSBA guidelines, but there are several spaces that are substantially below MSBA guidelines. And where that comes into play is spaces like science labs or special ed rooms where the space is not enough to operate safely and have enough room to accommodate the equipment that you need to do what you need to do in those spaces. So, next slide. It looks like many of you took a tour of the facility this evening, which is great. So, as a result of those many phases of construction over time, it's a pretty easy building to get lost in. The circulation is very convoluted. While the finishes are very robust, you've got, you know, a lot of glazed tile and concrete masonry units. They're very durable, and terrazzo floors, you know, the colors are dated. But beyond that, there's a lot of hazardous material that would need to be dealt with over time with projects. I'll come to the roof at the end. There are many spaces that are not ADA accessible. As already discussed, many of the educational spaces are just not properly sized. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are all at the end of their useful lives. They require replacement, and I'm sure Frank let you know about the roof, if you haven't heard about it already. Significant issues with leaking, just an ongoing concern that the district is having to chase after all the time. So these are serious deficits that really need to be addressed.
Thanks, Helen. So Christian Wissett with Jones Wissett Architects. Again, thank you for coming tonight. As Ben mentioned with the schedule, so we started off the process with the visioning, talking to the community, talking to staff, at the same time looking at existing conditions, and as part of that process, trying to come up with a number of different solutions for the community to weigh in on and for the school building committee in particular to weigh in on. So here we see 4 different options, and from left to right, option 5B was an all-new construction with a separate kind of outdoor community facility closer to the track and field. Option 3C was a new school. I'm gonna, maybe if I just kind of, oh, if I back up, it's okay. Okay, I'll just back up. Option 2C was an addition renovation option, so we did want to look at were there portions of the existing building that could be saved. We've done that successfully on past school projects, and sometimes it's worked out quite well. And then option 1 is something that we're always encouraged to look at from the MSBA. The state is very curious on this option. This is a base repair option. So really, if we didn't improve the educational environment at all, but really just tried to bring the building up to current code standards. So that includes accessibility, that includes energy code, that includes new mechanical systems, but not really shifting any walls or updating the spaces within the building. So over time, for those of you that have been to this presentation before, there's a number of slides in between here and the next one, but we'll just kind of fast forward. And the school building committee elected to proceed with what we're calling option 3C. That was the preferred schematic, as Ben mentioned in the preferred schematic report. So we just presented to the MSBA last week to a portion of their board, letting them know that this is the direction that the building committee has voted to go forward in. And we got a lot of positive feedback from the MSBA. And so again, we're looking forward to that board meeting in April so that we can proceed into schematic design. So for the project cost, there's some questions on the MSBA reimbursement rate. And as Gordon mentioned, that critical word is eligible costs. So you have to go through a rather complex spreadsheet to really try and figure it out. The bottom line is that we will not know these exact numbers until the end of schematic design. And the MSBA is very nervous about people talking about numbers at all before we have those numbers concretely at the end of schematic design. On the other side, you as taxpayers and community members, of course, want to know how much this project's going to cost. So we do the best we can to come up. We have it professionally estimated. It's already been estimated twice by 2 different cost estimators. So we have some data from those, and then we try and do the best we can looking at past projects to figure out approximately how much the MSBA will be able to reimburse the town. So here you can see we have some ranges, and we have an approximate amount of MSBA reimbursement. And we wish those numbers could be specific now, but we really have to wait till the end of that schematic design process. So the project cost for the all-new option is about between $175 and $180 million. That's for all of the project costs, construction costs, as well as soft costs, so furniture, consultant fees, contingency, et cetera. An estimated grant from the MSBA of $55 million, so a local share of about $120 to $125 million. What was interesting on this, it's a little bit grayed out now, but we were surprised to see that the ad reno option was so close to the all-new option in terms of cost figures. And a lot of that had to do with the age of the building, and really trying to bring it all up to code was a much more expensive endeavor than we had hoped when we started looking at that option. Gordon, if you want to go to the next one. So part of that process was evaluating the pros and cons with the school building committee. We came up with a very large matrix looking at, benefits to the school, benefits to the district, benefits to the town over time. We also tried to solicit a lot of feedback from the community. So this is an example from our meeting at the senior center in September of 2022. We had boards up on the walls, and folks could put, aspects of the design that they happen to like or happen to not like. So we wanted really kind of specific feedback of where they were placed on the board, and then we had red Post-it notes for things that they did not like, green Post-it notes for things that they did like, and it was very apparent that the ad reno option and the base repair option got a lot of red stickers, and the all-new option got a lot of green stickers. So that played an important role in helping the school building committee make its final choice. Just very quickly, we wanted to cover the cost of doing. Oh, question.
Does 3C include the pool?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Does 3C include the pool?
No, thank you for that question. So the MSBA stated very clearly that they won't participate in a project that includes a pool. So the pool would be a separate project that we have all the intentions of having that be a separate project that runs at the same schedule as the high school project and even is constructed at the same time. And we'll get to the plans in just a second where you can see that we've taken that into account. But thank you for that clarifying question. Yes, that does not include the pool in those numbers and figures. Another question?
I have a question. If you go back to that other slide.
Sure.
You had this up at the senior center
Yes.
for comments. Wouldn't it have made more sense to have it at the library where families come in that have children in the school than the senior center?
This was just a one-night event that was in September, and we're trying to spread the events that we have all throughout the town. So we've had a few here, as Gordon said. We've been to a few of the PTO meetings at the elementary schools, but this one happened to be at the senior center.
It's an odd place to have that. And the second question I had, Gordon, did you say that the reimbursement would be 56%, or were you saying it's 56 million?
56.8%. Yeah, not
Percent,
million.
well, then those numbers don't,
Of eligible costs, that was the key, eligible costs.
of eligible.
That's
And they have a lot of written material on what costs are eligible and what costs are not eligible.
Right. So it is very confusing because, so they try and set that base rate depending on kind of the economic factors within your town. But then by the time you get to the actual reimbursement rate, it is much lower because of those eligible costs. And it is a difficult part of the process. It's confusing for every community, but it's how the state program is run, unfortunately. Question in back?
The option you picked, the 175, 180, does that include the pool costs? Is that all inclusive of all the projects, endeavor, in those numbers, in that estimate?
It does not include the pool, and we'll get to that in just a second when we show up the site plan, but it does
So when you're
include,
telling me the 170, the 180 does not include a pool, and $55 million is the grant from the state against a 175 to 180 estimate right now? So it's not 56, it's almost like a third
correct,
in real numbers?
correct.
Okay, so I would wish you emphasized what the real percentage of participation is by the state with the project you have at hand, rather than say 56. We understand 56, but we're really dealing with some real numbers here.
Yes.
And I like to have the numbers presented properly. And if it's 30-something or 40%, then say 40%.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It is much closer to
And say what's in the
30%.
170 and 180. So this project could be 200 million or 190. with a pool.
If you factor the pool project into it.
Those things should be presented to us in that fashion.
I believe you did mention you have additional slides with additional.
Right. So we don't have any cost impact on the pool because that has become a separate project. So again, at the end of schematic design, we'll have much firmer numbers for both this project, and then as that pool project goes at the same timeline as the school project, we'll be able to present both together. I'm sorry. No. So we'll finish schematic design in October. We should have those numbers a little bit before that, so maybe beginning of September, and then the vote is until November. So you'll certainly have those numbers before you vote on the project. That is what you will be voting on. Yeah.
On option 5B, what would the community building be for?
So that was an idea of basically trying to combine that pool project with more community resources. It was early on in the process when we weren't quite sure how the funding was going to work with the MSBA. It ended up being more expensive anyway because it moved some of the program from the school to a separate area. So it wasn't pursued much further by the building committee. No, it had other programming in it as well.
Once we know the number, and we're going to vote on it in November, what's the average overruns, and how will we fund that? All projects have overruns. All long-term projects have escalating costs. How will we, within the town, budget for that? Well, let's just guess, if we could guess. It'd be 200 million, and it ends up to 220. Where does that come from, or how do we guard against that?
So there's a rigorous cost control process during that detailed design phase Ben was talking about in the initial schedule, and our last slide also goes into that a little bit. But so we have cost estimates throughout that process at design development at 60% construction documents and at 90% construction documents. The school building committee actually recently voted to have a construction manager at risk approach for this project. So that means we'll have a contractor on board during the design development phase. So during that whole process, we are looking at costs and making the cuts then and there, if needed, to meet that budget that's set at schematic design.
Well, all projects have costs.
So there's
I just have a quick question, just to maybe see, in these past projects that you've done, is there any way, or have you been able to give the town maybe what it's gonna cost them, like, on average, like your taxes are gonna go up by,
Yes.
you know, $100 or $1,000 if we end up with option 3C? Because I think that would maybe make people feel a little better about these graduated numbers. Is there a guesstimation on something like this and maybe what another school has come to make it a safe environment for your kid, to where we're prepared for an active shooter, because that's the world that we live in, to where our kids don't have to change their clothes because the ceiling tiles fell on them and they got wet, to where they don't have to wear 5 coats to school because they actually have heat in that room, and then also so that they don't have to wear the minimum amount of clothes because there's no air conditioning in the room and they have to try to stay awake throughout the day. I have 5 kids in these schools, where I think it's really important that we realistically think about all the options that we're talking about for our kids and as a taxpayer. But I think that it's also important that we give people real numbers, because we risk losing people coming to the town, and this is a family town. So I think it's a really good idea to give maybe people that aren't understanding all the project variants some real numbers that would affect their pocket.
really excellent point, and good points about the existing conditions on the school. So, which we hope to address in the proposed project. So again, we have broad numbers that we're giving you a range right now, and so we're looking at that from the town perspective of the impact on those taxes, and we hope to have those for you at the next meeting that's being processed right now. And then again, so that's also still going to be a range. So if you have an average home in East Long Meadow, your average tax bill is going to go by X to Y per year, and that's the calculations we're doing right now. At the end of schematic design, again, well before the vote in November, we will have much more exact figures, because we will know exactly our maximum budget from the cost estimate % from that process, as well as a much better idea of the MSBA reimbursement. So again, we want to get the word out now. We can't get you the exact specifics now, which is really hard, but we also want to introduce the process and get your feedback. So that's why this is a long process and why we don't have all of the answers tonight. Should we keep going, or should we keep taking? Why don't we try and get through, and then can we save questions for the end unless something is super critical, okay? Stand up and wave your hands if we really need to stop. Okay, so real quickly, I just wanted to talk, so we had the 4 options up there. We wanted to talk about the 5th option, which is the cost of doing nothing. So that is, of course, always an option of not the addition renovation, not the new, not even the base code upgrade. There's some serious concerns with doing nothing. I think you brought up a lot of great points. So top of the list is risking accreditation from the New England Association of Schools. These are how all public high schools in the state are accredited. That agency does look at the physical conditions of the building when they're looking at accrediting schools. And so that's something that, I don't know, is a concern. If the town elects to do nothing, there is the concern with the piecemeal capital expenditure. So it's not as efficient as doing the whole project at once, but you could try and tackle these one thing at a time. We think it's important to note that some of these come with a pretty high price tag. So the roof itself is looking at $5 to $6 million just to do the roof itself and not deal with any of the other conditions throughout the building. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing all needs to be upgraded wholesale. And so when looking at those numbers, the mechanical system, for a new mechanical system, again, without touching any walls, without touching any finishes, just looking at the mechanical system itself is in the range of $16 to $18 million. So we've done a cost estimate on that base code upgrade, and so you can look at that and think about trying to do those projects over the years and what that might end up costing the town without any MSBA participation. Part of the issue we've had in upgrading schools piecemeal is that at some point you trip the amount of work you've done where you need to bring the whole building up to code for accessibility, or you need to introduce sprinklers to the entire building. So again, suddenly you have a much larger project on your hands. The MSBA, there is a risk of not obtaining MSBA approval to re-enter the program. As Ben mentioned, there's about 50 to 75 projects that are submitted every year, and in 2022, only 10 were invited into the core program. The MSBA looks at the conditions of the existing school. They also look at the conditions of the community. If they feel that it's a community that is not ready to participate in that process, they're less likely to admit you into the program. This one's a little bit of a technicality, but just if the town has to go through the MSBA process again, they will not reimburse you for work that they feel like they have already paid for. So they've already paid for a feasibility and a schematic design. If you have to do that again, they will not pay for it the next time around. Again, no improvements to delivery of education, which is the main reason that we're here. Possible reduction in enrollment, possible reduction in property values, possible reduction in state education funding. I think are all pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to pass it over to Helen to talk a little bit about the proposed site.
Thanks. So let's talk about the really exciting parts of a new school here on this site. So some of the things that went into this, the plan for this site, with a lot of interaction with school building committee and lots of stakeholders, the community, is creating a site that feels safe, welcoming, and like a campus, a green campus. We want to maintain that visual connection with Maple Street, that main access. We have laid out the building such that we're taking best advantage of north-south light for classrooms, which is really important for learning and for solar heat gain control. We will be planning in many opportunities for outdoor learning, and that was something that came up with the MSBA at our meeting with them yesterday. They were very interested in understanding how East Longmeadow uses outdoor spaces such as your courtyards right now, and Superintendent Smith and Principal Page had all the answers. You use your outdoors. So we're going to have some exciting outdoor learning spaces planned. With a more efficient building footprint, we've been able to provide a fields layout that really accommodates all the field program that the athletic director had asked for, including 2 softball fields, which you don't have on site now. And of course, accessibility throughout the site, but also the stadium, so a new press box, a concession stand are all included in the project at this moment. With respect to circulation and safety, this plan accounts for separated bus and parent drop-off loops, with accessibility to change them if they don't work in the future. So that central loop is currently designated for parent drop-off because that'll have the longer queuing line, and then the secondary loop. Sure. Oh, thank you, Greg. Or Vanna. Greg. The secondary loop would be for buses. And this also helps us better segregate pedestrian and vehicular crossings. It minimizes them. We have separated student and staff parking, 360-degree access for emergency vehicles only, so you won't be able to drive around the site unless you are a fire truck. And we heard, loud and clear from the neighbors on Norden Street in that area, that neighborhood, that it's not safe, and eliminating traffic from that street was a high priority. And based on our traffic study, it appears that the site will work just fine by eliminating that. So that is the current layout of the site. And yes, Christian is reminding me a couple of things. So you see overlaid on this now in white dashed lines is the existing building. So the positioning of the new building does allow for constructing the new building while this building stays in place. So we won't be putting kids in modulars over time. The students will be able to stay in the building as the new building is constructed. And then Christian's reminding me, so near that secondary loop that Greg had kindly pointed out, you can see a dashed line that indicates a spot for the future pool building. So.
Tennis courts or basketball courts?
Yeah, why don't I talk about the fields program? Thank you, Gordon. So we will be replacing the tennis courts, which will be have to be relocated. The new basketball courts are up near the tennis courts. And we've got 2 baseball, 2 softball. I have to look at my notes. And 2 soccer, 1 football, practice football or JV football fields currently laid out on the site.
All right, so here we have a more detailed look at the proposed building. These are still fairly diagrammatic plans, so keep that in mind, but this is going to be the starting point for us in schematic design, where we're starting from. Thanks. Still am buzzing, so let's just back up. Okay, all right. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the new building is comprised of 4 different wings organized around a central circulation core. There is the athletic wing, which runs towards the north with the gym, locker rooms, all PE spaces, so that's going up on the plan, and that extends towards the town, towards the tennis courts, towards the existing track and field, so taking advantage of those adjacencies. The arts wing goes to the west or to the left on the plan. That has the auditorium, the music programs. It also has the district offices, LCAT, and the town IT. So those 2 wings are the more public-facing parts of the school, and they face towards Maple Street. The main entrance to the building is between those 2 wings, and you'd be entering in then from the north. Thank you. and you'd come in between admin and guidance and medical suite spaces in a secure entryway. The academic wings are to the south on the plan. They are oriented along an east-west axis, and that is intended to provide optimal daylight within the classrooms. It also allows for a connection between those academic wings and the wooded natural area on the south side of the site. So we're trying to create a kind of a more natural feeling in the academic wings. We're also pulling those furthest away from the street, so they're a little bit quieter and a little more isolated. The academic wings are divided into 4 academic houses, which are an interdisciplinary cluster of rooms. So you would have a mixture of different classroom types. You'd have labs, you'd have typical classrooms, some voc tech programming, all around a common flexible corridor with plenty of space for breakout work, for small group rooms, and then each of those houses has its own teacher planning room and a resource room. So support spaces for both teachers and students right within the academic house. The media center and the cafeteria join the 2 academic wings together. So the media center is the cafeteria is at the ground floor and the media center is at the 2nd floor. And those spaces serve as a social hub in the academic portion of the building. The cafeteria would have lots of connections to the outdoors, opportunities for outdoor dining, connections to an academic courtyard to the west. And then also with the academic wings, we have a couple connections to the outdoors, again, trying to create some outdoor learning opportunities on the site. All right, so what you're seeing on this slide is a comparison between the existing high school and then the new proposed high school in terms of how the program compares between the two and the space allotted to different programs within the 2 buildings. So there are a few things that are influencing the proposed new high school design. One of those is the educational plan that the district has put together for the school. So we are paying attention to the very specific needs of this high school and trying to design to that. We also are following the MSBA's guidelines for school construction. The MSBA has very specific suggestions on how much space should be allotted to each type of program, and we try to stay as close to that as possible in order to maximize the grant reimbursement. So what you're seeing at the bottom there is the total building floor area that's at the bottom. So what you can see is that the new high school is a little bit bigger than the existing high school, but it's not a lot bigger. But there are areas where the program proportions are changing. So if you look at the core academic spaces, which are classrooms and labs, or at the special education spaces or voc tech studios, you're getting a lot more square footage in those program areas. There are some where you are losing square footage. One, for example, you can see in art and music that the size is going down. That is specifically because in this existing high school, the art rooms are oversized according to MSBA. If you've seen them, they're in a previously like a workshop area. So the new school would still have 2 art rooms, a kiln room, storage. It just would be in a slightly smaller space. And I'm not going to go through each one, but we can come back if there's questions. Okay, so now that the committee has decided on new construction, we can start talking about the exciting opportunities that come with building a new building, one of which is the opportunity to incorporate sustainability and green building design throughout the building. The new building will be targeting LEED certification. It also is going to comply with the new stretch energy building code. It's in order to meet those requirements, we're going to be using a very high-performing envelope. We'll have a very efficient building envelope, and we're going to have a very efficient mechanical system. We've heard a lot of interest in solar PV, so that is something we're exploring as well. And so when we're working on this building design, we're looking at orientation, both for daylighting and also for solar orientation. Another opportunity that comes with a new building, and especially much easier to do in a new building than in a renovation, is to have just a really comprehensive and holistic approach to security in the building design. And what we're wanting to show on this slide is that when we come to security, we're looking both at a high level and at a detailed level in our design process. So starting out at this high level, how can the building design itself promote security with things like visibility, transparency, and sight lines, things like that. And then as we develop the design, we'll be getting into the details, things like the material at the entryways and the door hardware at every door on the building, the specific security systems. So all of that comes into the process, and throughout the design process, we'll have a lot of engagement from key stakeholders. So we've already had talks with the police department and fire. We'll continue to be talking with them, school SRO, administration, and we have a security consultant on the team as well. Okay, and then this is an important one. This opportunity with the new school construction is that we get to design a building that is suited to the educational goals of the building, of the school. We've heard repeatedly that there's an interest in creating an inclusive and student-centered school, and so that is what we are aiming for in this new design. Many different ways to get to be student-centered, looking at creating a variety of different teaching spaces, different sizes of spaces, different outdoor learning spaces, indoor learning spaces. We have lots of small group spaces, and then we have a large group instructional room as well, so you have just a whole scale of opportunities for teaching. And then, of course, there would be all new infrastructure, all new technology, furniture, finishes. So it's going to feel like a modern, up-to-date school building. And then we have this focus also on enrichment programs and hands-on learning.
So these are just some preliminary massing models, again, at early stages before we get into schematic design, but you can see here on the left that's kind of looking towards Maple Street, with Maple Street at the top of the slide. On the right, it's the reverse perspective. But again, trying to nestle the school into the site, avoiding the existing school as much as we can for that construction phasing, but also really trying to take advantage of the woods to the south, the wetlands, take advantage of the plentiful playing fields to the west, and of course trying to engage the school the best we can with the existing track and field and football field. Gordon, if you want to go to the next one. Just very quickly, we want to talk about that next phase, and we've kind of gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit with the questions, but that's helpful. So schematic design, again, basically from April to October. And this is really the phase of the project that's so critical because this is where the budget gets set, right? Set in stone. So in some ways, it's, on a typical other design project, schematic design might look more like what we just saw, just kind of rough building massing. For these MSBA projects, the end of schematic design is much more detailed so that we can really understand the materials that are going into the building, the materials that the outside is made out of, the insulation levels, the types of windows, so that all of that can be cost estimated at the end of schematic design. We can get as accurate a number as possible. So at the end of that phase, we'll be submitting these documents to the state. So the first is that comprehensive cost estimate. Again, 2 independent cost estimators, and then you have a reconciliation so that they agree on one number. It's really helpful in case one sees a different amount of scope than the other. And that sets that project scope and budget agreement, and that's in red because it's a very important document for the MSBA. We'll also be submitting to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They're really interested in our spaces for students with disabilities or special education spaces. That's an area where the MSBA kind of steps back a little bit, and really the DESE oversees that portion of the project in much more detail. So we have a separate submittal to that state agency. And then we'll have a very thick binder that up there next to me is the binder from the preferred schematic report. We'll have something similar for the schematic design binder, again with getting into more detail. We'll have a bunch of drawings as well as a project manual, so that's the beginning of our specifications. So again, that's going into the types of materials, really listing it out in great detail. Any items that are proprietary. We're looking at furniture budgets, technology budgets, all of that gets wrapped into those project costs. So that's why we have such a robust process for schematic design. And then this is just looking at the timeline in a different manner than those modules that Ben introduced us with. So again, statement of interest back in 2019. We're right in that feasibility schematic design process right now. We have the MSBA targeted board meeting of October in 2023, and that's where they will hopefully approve the schematic design, and then the local vote after that in November. So with that local vote, then we go into design development and construction documents, and that's when we really get into the details of, you know, how does the foundation connect to the wall, how does the wall connect to the roof. We're really getting into the details of the documents. Again, the school building committee recently voted to go construction manager at risk. So a huge benefit of that approach is that we're able to get the contractor on board while we're still in that process. So they come on, they're involved in those cost estimating processes. They can also get started with the construction process early. So we're showing construction actually starting before design is finished. So we'll have some early packages go out. They'll be able to start doing some site work, maybe some foundations, before we're even done with all of the rest of the construction documents. This is also that we can try and target that occupancy date of August of 2026 to get students into the new building. Then once they're in that new building, then the existing building would be demolished, the site would be finished, and we'd be in that closeout period in 2027. So that concludes our presentation. We do want to invite folks to the next community forum, which we've targeted for May 18th. We also have a website that's very easy to find from the town website. We have school building committee meetings every month. Those are open and public. Please check out the website, and then also here's the email address where you can email the project team specifically. And there's also that on the website, so you don't have to write that whole long email address down right this minute. I think we will now open it for questions.
My question is around the rear access. If we're taking away rear access to the school, what's the expectation? How are we going to get people back there that are disabled or elderly who can't take a trek from the parking lot all the way back to where those new fields are going to be? Because that's a pretty long trek.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue with removing that formal parking area and access from Norden Street. But I don't know if Greg wants to point to, there is the nearest parking area that will also sort of serve district offices. The early childhood program is at that end of the building. There is some parking there, central. There will be paved and accessible pathways to get to all the fields. But yeah, you're right. It is true that, taking away that access, and we've been talking about that with the school building committee, will present some other challenges. But it's not out of the realm. It's interesting. We looked at, someone had brought up, look at Wilbraham. All of the fields are so close. We actually overlaid and analyzed how close the closest parking was to the furthest field. And we are, it's less than Wilbraham. I don't know if that's any comfort whatsoever, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that way.
I just had a question regarding the pool. And I wrote down my question so I wouldn't forget, would the percentage reimbursement apply to the pool project as well?
No. No reimbursement on the pool, which is why it's a separate deal. It'll be a separate vote, a November ballot. We'll have the vote for the total project. So what you saw is option 3. And a second vote will be for that pool, which we get 0 reimbursement for.
On the same ballot, right?
On the same ballot, yep.
Yeah, if I could just add, Greg, it can't be, the district tried very, very hard to get the pool into the project. It was certainly part of what was put out when our team was chosen, when Skanska was chosen. But under no circumstances will the MSBA participate at all if a pool is part of the project. And I'm sorry to say that, but that is their policy.
Right. Also, we would plan to have the same construction management team do the pool. It would be at the same time, and we would connect it to the existing building. So separate project, but it will connect. So kids won't have to go outside to get one together.
Hi, I'm the swim coach in town, actually, so this pertains to the pool. So if the budget passes and they go with the school, and that's fabulous because my kids go here and I think that's great, and the pool does not pass, then that means now our town does not have a pool for either the high school, the rec swim team, or swim lessons at all. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The second vote would be for the pool, which is why we went away from the community building. The community building would have been more expensive. The pool is by itself completely, which would make that number as small as possible. We want to make it as appealing to as many voters as possible, and we're going to do that. We'll keep it to a budget.
I know that, I'm sorry, I forget what your name is. You said there was another plan to go with the pool. Is there, I can see that it says there might be a future pool there, but can you give us any numbers as to what you're projecting and what that building would look like?
Sure, if you want to just go forward one slide, Gordon. It's a little bit off the screen here, but you can, oh, it's going to yell at me. Is it okay if I just yell? Yeah, so we've got, wow, thank you, Greg. So yeah, all along, this is where the pool would have been connected to the building here. And so instead, we just pulled it off of the building a little bit. So it's up with that athletics wing. We're thinking about it in terms of site circulation, and again, how that circulation could go through and to the football field just beyond. But it's very similar to what we've got ballparked right now is very similar to what the pool looks like at West Springfield. So, you know, great. So that's what we have, you know, kind of roughed out on the site plan for right now. But yes, we need to get that process started. We need to get a pool building committee and start, that would be great, and start getting their input and have them shape what goes on inside of that building, just as we've had input to shape what's going on inside of the school.
Thanks, Greg. Marilyn Richards from the Town Council. I've sat in at the school building committee meetings. I've seen various stages of these plans, and I just want to say what's not to love about what you're proposing, and whether, you know, I just need to recognize or have us recognize the work you've done, and thank you very much, first of all. Second of all, what's the life expectancy of this building?
So that's part of what drives up some of the construction cost a little bit compared to other projects you'll see. So it's public construction, so publicly bid, but also it has to meet, it's required to meet a 50-year lifespan from the MSBA. That's, you know, part of their charge is that the building must last 50 years. Often you see it, of course, lasting longer than that. We're looking at very robust exterior materials, a lot of masonry. You will not find vinyl siding on the school. You will not find stucco. We're trying to really design for longevity, and that goes for the systems as well. The electrical systems, the mechanical systems, thinking about what the school needs now, but also thinking about where the technology is headed in the next, as far ahead as our engineers can see, and trying to bake that into the design.
Thank you. Based on the debt exclusion, which probably would last at least 20 years, I was hoping we'd get to pay for this building before we had to build another one. So
Right.
I thank you for that. Now, I also know that money is huge. It's huge, and the people are concerned. And I know that there's going to be serious attention paid to reining in some costs. I mean, you've alluded to that as we've talked about it this evening. And my hope is that the cuts that are made are not replaced with inferior material. So if the town votes to support this project, that we know that it will last for 50 years. So that's my comment. Thank you.
You mentioned something about the programs of like a tech program coming back or reinstated. What programs are we bringing back into the school? I know we have a C-Tech program we outsource, but for the kids that want to pursue something other than college, what are we actually bringing back?
So actually, the plans are not bringing back any of the programs that currently are operating at a Career Tech, which is part of the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative. What it's doing is bringing into the current century our graphics program, our culinary arts program, and our tech ed program that currently operate in the building now.
I had a quick question about the timeline and kind of the closeness to the vote. So if I followed it correctly, the schematic design would be completed in September with the updated costs, and then there's a board meeting in October, and then there's a vote November 7th. So if the board meeting in October with the schematic design comes back with recommended changes one way or the other, or is it just, how does that work?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. The MSBA will be reviewing the project well before that board meeting. So by the time it gets to the board meeting, that really is just a formality. If you've made it that far, then it's...
Wouldn't be any substantial changes that would then impact the information?
No. Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to kind of go the opposite of Marilyn's question. She asked about the life expectancy of the new building. I want to ask about the life expectancy of this building. You had a slide up there that said, what if we do nothing? So as a community, if we, for some horrible reason, decide to do nothing, how much longer can we really kick the can down the road with this existing building? How many more years can we get away with that, based on your expertise and your feasibility study findings?
Yeah, it's a really hard one to say. Helen wanted to put me on the spot. So there's obviously current issues with the roof, right? So I think what we were trying to show in that slide of the cost of doing nothing is that, one option is that code upgrade option where you just come in and try and do everything all at once. You don't touch any of the walls. You spend $100+ million, and you basically have the same shell that you have now. And so we go through that process because, okay, maybe you won't bite all of that off at once, but you could expect to spend that much money over a series of years, even if you do it piecemeal, right? And with escalation costs, maybe it would end up being more than that. What we've run into on some of our projects is what has really tied district's hands is that they start not being able to get replacement parts for their mechanical systems in particular. And so some of these systems are just so old that you can't repair them anymore. You have to totally redo it. And as soon as you totally redo it, then you're looking at accessibility upgrades. Then you're looking at a sprinkler system. And then at that point, why didn't you just do the whole project to begin with? So it does turn into kind of a slippery slope issue.
And that's zero reimbursement, correct? That's not getting any MSBA reimbursement.
So the MSBA does have an accelerated repair program that you'd have to apply for separately, and they might fund some of that, but again, that's a long, multi-step process. And
we're not in that. So
correct.
So we're on the hook.
And it's on hold.
Correct. And that whole program is on hold right now.
Accelerated repair is currently on hold.
Yes.
And we would lose if we did nothing, any eligibility we've got.
Yes.
By already being approved with our SOI. Then we could be paying everything we went back. Sorry, we're good now.
I'm not doing my job very well.
Hi, I understand that the school building committee recently made a decision to include school administration, IT, and LCAT in the building of the new high school. Is that correct? And that cost is estimated at around $5 million? Correct. Which is unreimbursable. So can you explain to me why the building committee would be determining where LCAT and IT should reside, rather than the town manager?
I'll take a bite at that. In the end, it's up to the town manager where those two departments end up. Where town administrators end up is up to the school committee, the executive part. And so you're right. Currently, we have no future plans for IT or LCAT anywhere else. And we believe there's value in having LCAT and IT here, as we do now. So our plan is to have a TV studio. If we were to break LCAT separate, we would look at potentially more staff, if we staff this studio and somewhere else. Same with IT. IT would end up having at least a help desk here. If so, that might be one or two more staff. So again, value in having them both here. We're all one town, we're all in it together. We think that it's good that they're here, so the committee decided to do it. If we had another alternative that was viable, we would consider it. It's not there.
Thank you for that. There's an ongoing effort to figure out additional space for the entire town, separate from the high school. And I don't understand why you would include those guys in the high school versus exclude them, go forward that way, save us the $5 million, and let the analysis that's going on for the additional space include those three departments, or at least IT and LCAT.
You estimated that the headcount was 4 or 5 people that we'd be able to reduce. Is that right? By co-sharing, so you're saving $300,000 or $400,000 a year every single year, which probably is less than $5 million, right?
Yeah, but we don't have a place for these people is what we're saying, and there's value in having them in the building. It was, and in fact, it's been part of the plan, but we thought we'd bring it up again and have a lively discussion. What the building committee did, and we believe that it's most prudent for this town to have those three departments in the new school. If we had someone, and they're already here now, that's a great point. All three of those departments are here, and they'll need to be housed somewhere else. Currently, there's no viable somewhere else right now, as far as we know.
The point that I was trying to make is that if we're reducing headcount by keeping them in the school, it's more cost effective to spend the $5 million now than to put them somewhere else, build another space, and exactly right.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
If I can just piggyback on what Mr. Thompson was talking about. So first, the LCAP program, which is obviously run here on campus. We do have a lot of students who participate in that while they are here. Losing that from the school would be losing, in a sense, classes for students and experiences that they already currently have. And just with the IT piece, and Mr. Quimby can speak to us, the most devices in this community who utilize the IT department are housed here at the high school. We have 800 students we're a one-to-one school. We have over 100 staff who all have devices. I will assume, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but we are probably the most tickets that you receive in terms of IT work. And they work hand in hand with us, not just with obviously work orders, but also the maintaining of our database. So they have a liaison in the IT department who works directly with the schools, and it's their job to maintain our database. So we use them a lot. They have a lot of value here. Obviously, you know, the central office staff is included in our building as well. They've been here for a very long time. You go to other communities and a lot of other high schools, you will find that the central office staff is located there too. So give it a little context just so you kind of know the rationale behind it.
Can you explain why the MSBA is not reimbursing at the 75%? What in the project is making them not reimburse at 75%?
That original 56% number that we gave, and then the final number is much closer to 30%, as gentleman back mentioned. Yeah, so it's a very convoluted formula, unfortunately, but so I'll try and hit some of the high points. They will only reimburse to a certain dollars per square foot of construction costs. That dollars per square foot is a much lower rate than what it costs to build public construction in Massachusetts. It always has been, and that has only been exacerbated as of late as construction costs have continued to climb. So all of those costs above that reimbursement rate that they set, those are 100% on the town. They will only reimburse for 8% of site costs. So your site costs can only, any site costs that are above 8% of the building construction costs are on the town. On every single project, your site costs are over 8%. Thank goodness you have already done your football field and your track, because that would make your site costs even higher than what we're dealing with on this project now, but that's another big area where suddenly there's a lot of dollars that the MSBA is not participating in. There's a bunch of small items like hazardous materials in your floor, asbestos. They won't reimburse you for that because all of these are set so that they're trying to spread the money around as equitably as possible throughout the district. So that's the thinking that goes or throughout the Commonwealth. So that's the thinking that goes behind it, which is a major reason why they won't participate in any schools with pools anymore, is that for all the other high schools that don't have a pool, they want them to be on equal footing with schools that do have a pool. So that's the rationale behind it, but it does result in a very complex formula of figuring out exactly how many pennies they will actually not participate in.
In the numbers we've seen tonight, that does include the demolition costs of the existing building?
Correct.
In total?
Correct. Okay. Including the hazardous materials costs. Yeah.
Gordon, can you tell us, what is your estimated population growth or in the school system that you're looking for the next 10 years or 15 years in town?
Okay, I can't tell you 10 years or 15 years. What I can tell you is that the trend recently has been starting to slightly increase. Last 2 years, our kindergarten enrollment has been up. Next year, it's predicted to be about the same as it's been the last 2 years, and we currently are at a enrollment of about 2544, which is back to pre-pandemic levels.
Are you looking to improve any educational parameters with this new facility?
Absolutely. So the educational plan that was mentioned earlier, Mr. Page, Ms. Brown, and I put together currently what the programming in the high school, the current status of the programming in the high school is, and where we'd like to grow it as we go into a new facility. And a lot of that is around the idea of interdisciplinary learning, building a situation where as you saw those wings, which actually are up on screen now, where the different content areas can work together and build projects where they're actually taking on real-world issues and working through it, both in their math content, their science content, their English content as they write about it. And so we want to grow that more, and the building that looks like this would support that.
So you're looking to improve those areas, that will be reflected in your reporting to the state educational department as far as the performance of our high school?
I'm sorry, say that again, I missed the first
So
part.
you're looking to improve those areas that coincide with the parameters that the state looks at your performance overall?
Absolutely, yep.
So if I understand it correctly, we're looking to finance $120 million. Can you guys tell me how that works, over how many years, at what percentage rate, how much a year that's going to add to the budget?
So I think those numbers are something we're working on, and what we're hoping to do is have that type of specificity for you at the May 18th forum.
Well, I took a look at 120 million financed over 20 years at 3.5%, and it comes out to $8 million a year. I think our whole budget is $50 million a year. So it's pretty simple to see. It kind of blows up the budget, but it is in that number, and that's if everything goes right. And I really wish we could get some kind of solid numbers here so we know, what we're voting on.
Sure, and that's a great question. And I think as we move into the May forum, we'll have more numbers for you, and then certainly as we get closer to the early fall, we'll have even more specific numbers for you. So as soon as we have the information, we want to get it out to you.
Just wondering if there is a mechanism to get a pulse on what the vote would be, since you have a 10-day revision period upon a negative result. Not familiar with that. Sure. So I think you mentioned earlier there's 10-day revision period if the vote fails. So just thinking about how much work has been done and how long that takes, that's a pretty short period of time to make revisions necessary. To your point back here about that failing. So when can we get a pulse on what the vote thought process is before the actual vote? Because it doesn't give you enough time to revise it.
Christian, I think the 10 days you were talking about is if the vote fails, we can go back to MSBA and tell them why we think it failed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it gets us another vote right away or that they'll continue to offer funding for us. So I think most importantly, we got to get it on the first shot.
That's exactly correct. So the 10 days is just specific to coming up with a plan, kind of responding to the state and saying, why you think that the vote may have failed, coming up with some plan or avenue from there to get back to an approved vote. You do need to specify kind of what you're thinking for, or what the town is thinking for a timeline for this. And then once again, that's all, you're then at the mercy of MSBA. So I think that it really needs to paint a very clear picture that, okay, we are going to go back and fix this component because that's definitely where it went wrong, and it needs to happen quickly because they don't like to sit on those funds for a while and just wait for a district to make a decision. So.
As a practical matter, if you fail the vote, you're effectively done. Right. So you will see more outreach beginning in the next month. It will ramp up over the summer into the fall when the financial information is available, more detailed estimating is available, more detailed design is completed. So we will go into this thing as smart and as transparent as we can be. Right? And we don't want anybody, making a vote, either pro or con, without understanding everything. So unfortunately, at this point in the process, there's only limited information that we can share. You know, as Gordon mentioned, we have a new finance director who started just 5 weeks ago, and she's been underwater with the budget, so she hasn't had a chance to be able to focus on this. So now that she can, she'll be able to do some analysis. The town also has outside vendors that provide similar analysis, and they also work, you know, throughout the Commonwealth, so they'll be able to tell you, look, most communities, they don't bond for 20 years, they bond for 30. Right? Most communities do this or that. Now, we can choose what we want to do. Their job is to give us the options and to tell us the likely outcomes.
I just have a question regarding the design update regarding CTEC. Was there ever any of the programs at this school back in the day? Because you said that you were designing for culinary, graphic arts, and I think for tech, for IT. Was there any type of, like, how many CTEC programs are currently being sent over? I have visited West Springfield for an event, so I got to see the CTEC tour. That's pretty impressive, but our kids are being bused over there, and I've heard that when they get back, you know, it's really rushed. So to get to lunch and get to their next class or end their day, however it works. So was any of those CTEC classes ever housed here? And is there a consideration for building that in so that our kids don't have to get shipped out?
So in order to bring those programs back, we would actually have to reclassify the educational programming that's going on at this high school, which is a process in and of itself, and then therefore also escalates the cost of any type of building that we're building. One of the reasons why things like auto, metal, wood, the things that were originally here in the high school got moved out is because it's more cost efficient to do it as a collaborative with 7 districts paying into that collaborative than to try to do it on your own. Some shops were here, absolutely, yes, sorry.
I just have a question/comment. I like the fact that if we do nothing, that it was mentioned about enrollment possibly going down and our property value going down. Have you thought about doing any surveys on how people feel about, hey, if there's not a new high school, what would you do? Because I know I've had conversations with multiple people who are thinking about, if the high school doesn't pass, I'm going to move. I'm going to move to Long Meadow. I'm going to move to Wilbraham. Or I'm going to look at a different school. I mean, I know some people may not want to spend the money on taxes, but then your property value is going to go down because people aren't going to want to move to East Long Meadow as more stuff is happening and the news is covering it and more people know about what's going on with the school.
So it's a great point and great question. We've done surveys, but mostly around building design and interest in the new high school, but maybe that's a survey that we should do as we start to ramp up with more information. Correct, yeah. Great point.
What happens if the school loses their accreditation? You mentioned if they get...
So when you lose your, if we continue to be a member of the NEASC, basically full loss of accreditation probably is not going to happen. But what happens is they put you on probation, and we're on warning right now for community resources, which is basically your building. And so they continue to put you on probation. They set certain expectations that puts then stress on Mr. Page, Mr. Smith, and the staff at the high school to figure out how we're going to produce certain things and make sure programming is going a certain way in a building that was built 60 years ago. Also what happens, and it ties in with the question over here, is that when you lose accreditation, you generally lose enrollment.
I just want to thank everybody for your questions. I think that they're awesome questions, and I think there's lots of questions that people hadn't thought to ask before. I want to invite anybody who wants to help spread information, hi Gordon, to email me at voteyeselhs@gmail.com. My goal is to just help spread information as efficiently and effectively as we can. So if anybody has any questions, ask them. I hope to be able to help get information out as much as possible. So thank you. Vote yes, ELHS @gmail.com.
Should we move forward with the new school as a way to expedite the construction process? After going through my first tour of the building, I'm not sure the school's going to last another 3 years. And I'm absolutely shocked that we haven't been shut down by the health department.
What do you want me to answer that, Christian? So we talk about CM at risk?
Yeah, I think we've already accelerated the process as much as we can, and part of that was the building committee voting to go construction manager at risk. If we had not gone that path, then you'd go the classic design bid build, so you'd have to wait till those construction documents are 100% done, then put it out to contractors to look at, to bid on. You pick the lowest bidder that's pre-qualified, but you don't really get a say in that process. So that would have taken longer to get a contractor on board. So we're already trying to expedite it as much as we can.
We're moving as aggressively as we can within the confines of the state process. The help of our DPW, we will last another 3 years.
I just have a logistics question. Should the high school not pass the vote and the pool does pass the vote,
Could happen. But just to that point, I don't think we would build the pool without the school, but we'd have to cross that bridge. We need a pool. I mean, that's clear. I think we can all agree on that, right?
I have a question. Have they done any testing on airborne mold in the building?
You want me to answer that too? Because I did talk to Bruce. So Bruce, Gordon will answer.
Okay. We have done testing on airborne mold, and actually we are now doing some testing this spring on airborne mold. No, we've done it periodically throughout the years since I've been here. Yeah, but we're doing testing this spring. So far, we've been in a good position and allowed to stay and continue to conduct activities. But every time you test, even if the air is acceptable, there's usually other things that they find that they would like you to mitigate. And so we do that.
I'm just curious if you guys have ever been a part of a project where the community utilized some of the site space to defray the costs of building through like community solar? Because I have 2 young children. I've never been to the school before tonight. I had no idea that the grounds were as big as they are. Like 61 acres is gigantic. And having 2 of everything is great, but if you lost 2 of those fields, as somebody who's in solar fintech, you could make $500,000 a year for 20 years and sell it back to the state. No. If you dropped a softball field and a baseball field, still leaving you with a softball field, a baseball field, all that other great sports stuff that's awesome, you could potentially defray the costs. I was just curious if that's a model you've ever seen before.
We did do one school, the Hoosick Valley School out in Western Mass. They had a leftover kind of hillside after they were done that could not be used for sports facilities, and they did get an SREC and a solar field on that. We are looking at PV on the roof. if it's not part of the project, it will certainly be PV ready, both structurally and conduit and closets inside the building, so that that could be done very easily in the future. We thought that the site felt very large at the beginning also, and really once we started programming it with the amount of parking requested, the amount of fields requested, it got pretty tight pretty quickly. And keep in mind that all of the wooded area to the south, a lot of that is protected by wetlands, so there's an offset from that. So it's a big site. It's well used. The athletic facilities are also well used by the community. I would say it's not as kind of vacuous as we had originally thought that it might be.
Just a quick comment to dovetail what we've been talking about. On Monday, the council will be meeting, and we will be discussing the last step of becoming a green community. And once we become a green community, we will be eligible for grants. And I'm not sure what, but I certainly encourage everyone to keep looking at what you can possibly apply for to help us financially. That's it.
Yes. Corey, you want to take us home?
Okay, thank you very much for spending much of your Thursday evening with us. We appreciate it, and we will have another public forum on May 18th with more specifics. So, we are determining where it's going to be, whether here or possibly at the Senior Center once again. Thank you.